Okay. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. Nice to see a full room, full space here. And we're going to get started. So today we are your resident standardization nerds. So apologies, a lot of standards geek talk coming your way. We're going to help you understand the standardization system as we know and love and see it at the Standards Council of Canada. We're going to talk to you about a very important standard that's on the horizon, actually already published, but can be of importance to you and your business. And we're going to explain how we piloted that. And this is the workshop. So be prepared to engage with your colleagues around the tables. We will have discussion times throughout. We're going to get you to consider some of the topics that we raise, meet people around your table and talk about it and learn from each other, but also try to engage with some of the ideas that we're going to share with you. So, with you today is myself. I'm a senior policy analyst at the Standards Council of Canada in Regulatory Affairs. I work primarily with federal regulators, helping them use standards and regulation and understand the policy utility and the regulatory utility of standards. And my colleague Jacqueline is here.
Hi everybody, my name is Jacqueline. I'll be roaming the floor as well. My role is at the conformity assessment side of Standards Council of Canada. So I work on the accreditation side of things. So how can we audit? How can we assess? How can we make it repeatable? And how can we make it accessible to every use case and every size of organization?
Awesome. So this is the lineup for the next hour. Hold on. All right, so we're going to kick it off with how standards and conformity assessment work. So what are standards? What is conformity assessment? How does it all come together in what we call the standardization system? So first of all, we'll introduce you to what the concept of a voluntary consensus standard. So we all know the word standard, any sort of set of principles or rules that are written down that you can follow to normalize a process or to describe what good looks like, what outcomes should be. Oftentimes standards deal with test methodologies or very specific technical approaches to a given problem. So standards that's a word that we use daily. What the Standards Council of Canada deals in is something called a voluntary consensus standard. And that is a standard that is developed in an open, transparent process with a balanced matrix of stakeholders through a recognized standards development process. And these standards development processes, by and large, follow the World Trade Organization's principles for good standards development that you see there on the screen. And at the end of that process, when a standard is built well, it meets the needs of the most widest possible range of users of that standard, and it's based on consensus, and we call them voluntary consensus standards. So that's really what we're talking about today, and they work together with something called conformity assessment.
So from the conformity assessment, you can think of it as the audit pyramid. And there are three primary levels. Welcome everybody, grab a seat. What we do at the top is have what's called an accreditation body. So Standards Council of Canada has that branch, which is all about accreditation services, that audit component. What we do is check the checkers. We basically assess these organizations who want the power and authority to give out certificates to organizations looking to have that extra reputation and compliance. So that conformity assessment body, a great example we hear often is CSA in Canada. They are those organizations that can give out certificates. And then organizations wanting that gold star, wanting that certification to prove that they're separate, have that third-party assurance, that's that bottom rung right there. So all of these are using standards or different types of requirements to build trust through this audit-style conformity assessment. The reason why we will aggressively plug accreditation is because it adds that third-party assurance that not all organizations have. We know this just in our regular everyday lives. You can print off a certificate that you have built on your computer and given to your child because they passed kindergarten, something fun. But what it is missing is that added layer of trust. And the third-party assessment that assurance gives and through accreditation helps you get internationally recognized, and then those internationally recognized conformity assessment bodies give out international certificates, which at a huge scale, especially in the AI space right now, builds your credibility in leaps and bounds, and also starts filtering out the bad actors in the market. So it's really building up your credibility quickly.
A good example of how accreditation works is within the Canada European European Union Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement, what we call CETA. There's actually a conformity assessment protocol in there that stipulates that SCC accredited conformity assessment bodies can be recognized in Canada and in the European Union. So what that means is that those accredited certification bodies can give you a certificate that then gives you broader market access. So we're arriving at our first workshop-y sort of task. So we want to get a sense, because we're trying to do, we're trying to speak to all kinds of listeners here today, but we don't really know anything about you. So to help us kind of tailor our messaging and to get you thinking, we would just have these kind of a scale of 1 to 5 on how familiar you are with standards as we've introduced them to you in the last few minutes. And I'm just going to go by a show of hands. So who is, I mean, nobody's in Camp 1 anymore because we just gave you a perfect description of what standards are. But let's say before you walked in here, who would have put themselves in Camp number 1? I'm unfamiliar with standards. Show of hands. Okay, excellent. And then who would have said, or would say, I'm somewhat familiar with them? Okay, that gives us an idea. Do we have anybody here who knows about standards and applies them often? All right, that's a wide range. And who here is in Camp 4, apply standards often, and know how they are written? All right, we're getting to the remnant. Okay, so and then some of you may be actively involved in standards development, applying them in a regulatory context. Yes, sort of a standards professional. All my SCC friends are putting up their hands. Yeah, okay. Oh, we have people who do that. Excellent. Okay, so there's a wide range of expertise here and experience with standards, and that's going to help actually in the conversations. And I see, that expertise is actually spread across the room. So when we get into the group discussions and we're circulating and making all the introverts really uncomfortable by pointing at you and asking you more questions, that there's a broad, the expertise is spread across, so there should be some really fruitful conversations that happen there. I thank you for engaging in that. First activity. And okay, so at your tables, there's a couple of questions here on that we want to get started with. So basically thinking through what we shared about standards and conformity assessment and the value of accreditation, where does your organization fit in that system that we described? And that's, so turn around, face your colleagues at the table, say hi, and let them know. And what we're trying to do here is build as well, give you an opportunity to build some potential relationships with people you've ended up sitting next to, and that's part of the value of the experience as well. So where does your organization fit in this, and what hurdles are you experiencing with respect to standards? And that's an important one, and we're going to circulate. We want to hear about the hurdles. We do. So if you have them, please share them with us as we walk around.
As an FYI, most of the ones are front left. Most of the threes are over here.
I saw some fives back here.
Fives are back here.
All right, just a couple more minutes for conversations. I don't want to stop you, but I'm going to say as well that in a few minutes we're going to ask for a few volunteers to give us a hurdle that their organization encounters with respect to standardization. So someone who's comfortable in jumping up and just spitting out the challenges, and we'll do that in just a few minutes. I don't know. I can't. Yeah, no. Yeah.
I do.
You do.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thanks for taking that time. We're gonna capture a little bit of the discussions that happened, not a formal reporting, but is there one or two volunteers who, at their table, they did mention some challenges around standards and conformity assessment that they encounter and they'd like to share with the group? Coming over. Oh.
So I just formulated my problem, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Now we're going to solve it. But
Okay, yeah. Oh, I thought so. Hello? Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. So my challenge is I have a nonprofit called Virtual Friend, and it's basically a chatbot that talks to people with anxiety, so they can reduce their anxiety by talking of their problems. And I actually didn't want to save the conversation histories because it's too delicate because I have a cloud. But now I think of proactively going through some standards process, so I can advertise that and say, okay, if you choose to have your conversation history with the AI bot to store in the cloud, we have this standard process we went through. And that would be great. Maybe probably for many other companies as well.
Yes, very interesting. So yes, we will talk a little bit about, well, we're going to talk about management systems for AI, and I think it'll be relevant. Another person who had a hurdle that they mentioned in their group that would like to share? Yes? No? Oh, okay, sorry. Got to be quick. Someone wants to do a hurdle? Ah,
One challenge that we had was even what the definition of AI is, whether what we believe around the table versus what the government might believe the definition of AI is versus what we've been using, predictive AI moving into generative AI, and it all kind of gets lumped together with those two letters. So even the definitions are challenging.
so a definition problem highlighted there. And we will talk, so there are, yeah, we will touch on standards for better or for worse. A family of standards almost invariably starts with a definition standard that sets the accepted terminology for that domain. And there is an ISO IEC standard from the same family that we're going to talk about that deals with standards, with definitions. Yeah, so there is a way to common language through standardization. That's almost the entire game of standardization is common language, and common process as well. So we will get into that as we move forward. So thank you everyone for those ideas and cues, and thank you for helping us see what the spread of expertise is so far. And as you can guess by now, this is not a TED Talk. This is a workshop. So thank you for engaging in that. And we're now going to move into part of the meat of this presentation, which is the standard that you may have heard mentioned this morning by our CEO on the main stage during the panel discussion. This is a standard that is recently published by ISO and IEC called ISO IEC 42001, Artificial Intelligence Management Systems. And we'll give you a sense of what that standard, where it comes from and what it could mean for this industry. So how did this standard, we call it AIMS for short, AI Management Systems. And the first thing you're going to want to start wrapping your mind around in understanding where this standard comes from is that letter salad there. So what is ISO IEC JTC1 SC42 Artificial Intelligence? That is actually one of the most influential international committees in the world. There are hundreds of experts from around the world participating in this committee. It's Joint Technical Committee 1, Joint Technical Committee 1, I should say. Subcommittee 42 has fewer members, but in the JTC1, there's hundreds and hundreds of experts from around the world, 41 countries represented, and another 60 or so are observing to that committee. And they manage about 4,000 standards, either in development or managing the standards lifecycle, about 4,000 standards for information technology. And Subcommittee 42 deals with artificial intelligence. And in around 2019, a Canadian delegation to Subcommittee 42 proposed a management system standard for AI. And that's what we're going to talk about. That standard was then worked on by 40 countries, actively providing text, and hundreds of experts, as I said, reviewing that text and commenting on it and refining those ideas as they came forward in that standard. And it recently published in December 27th. So it's a very significant achievement from a consensus building perspective. So what are management system standards? This is a particular genre of standard, okay? So there are standards that set product level requirements, process level requirements, standards for services, but there are standards there's this particular family of standards from ISO and IEC called management system standards. And these deal with the organizational processes that you use day to day. So an AI management system standard is a standard applied to the management system of an AI user or developer or any entity kind of using or applying or procuring AI even can use this AI management system standard. So there's some key examples here that many of you will be familiar with. I put those up there just to give you a little bit of an anchor. A lot of people know about 9001. That's a very common management system standard. It's actually a quality management system standard. There's a core standard from medical device industry, and many of you in the IT world know and love 27001 as also a core management system standard. So these are, management system standards can be kind of ground level setting requirements for organizations in a given industry that promote a sort of common approach, common processes, and that's what AIMS is. It's a management system standard. So I'll give you a flavor of AIMS here. You get a little snapshot of the content headings. The first content heading is really important, context of the organization. So what this standard allows you to do is bracket out the part of your organization that deals with AI. So you can be conformant to this standard in that part of your organization that deals with AI. If all of your organization deals in AI, then you can, of course, bring your whole organization into conformance with the standard. And then it goes through how you actually set that context where the standard is going to be applied. And then it has your very run-of-the-mill, very well-known content headings that are from all management system standards, setting requirements for leadership, planning, support, and the like. What I want to highlight here is that the annexes are critical to AIMS. So these annexes really give you a leg up in understanding how the controls are put in place, what kinds of risks emerge from AI, and how to apply this standard across different domains. There's advice in Annex D on using the standard across different domains. So it's intended to be a helpful document. A lot of expertise went into it, and it's actually got a really good reference section to other standards that are related. So if it's your first foray into an AI standard, it gives you references to other related standards that could be of interest to you as well. So it's a good kind of entry point. So we're gonna discuss a little bit more, and these are the discussion topics. So turn to your teams, to your tables. So what would it mean for your organization to apply a standard like this? You know, what would that change? What are how would you go about doing that? And then what are the challenges and opportunities? And we'll start with those two questions and see how far we get with those two. So please discuss. Any questions for me? Yeah. Yes, about that AI management system standard. How would that impact you? We don't know? That's a good answer. Yeah, some people have experience with other management system standards, and then they now that one. Yeah. Well, it's like the others with specific. The annexes are really the key because they talk about. Pardon? Yeah. It's structured exactly like that, but then the annexes get into the AI specific risks and controls that you can think about. That I don't know. I don't know. No. Okay. Well, I'll let you keep discussing. Yeah. Any questions for me? I don't want to interrupt. No? Okay. How are you feeling? 16:21. Got half an hour left. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's a good idea. No, I can ask for a report. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, yeah. Just a couple more minutes for this discussion, and I'm going to ask for anybody to come up with some, if anybody wants to share an opportunity they would see through AI management system certification. So think about if you can think of an opportunity that might come about from your perspective as a result of being certified to that document, then I'll ask you to pop up. But I'll do that in a minute. Yeah, yeah. So a couple more minutes for the conversation. Okay, we'll ask everyone to conclude the conversation. We'll come back to the music. Okay, who has in the short period so far drunk the Kool-Aid and knows of an opportunity related to AIM certification? Was there an idea here that? No, no. I've got a hand here. So we'll go this way.
Thank you. Very open question. I'm talking here to pharma, health, tech professionals. How industry specific are these standardizations?
That was a major discussion point in the development of the standard. How to make it industry agnostic while technology specific. So quality management, or I should say management system standards, like the few examples I showed, some of them are specific to an industry, like medical devices. Some of them apply across many sectors. So the AI management system standard does apply across many sectors, and it's kind of the structure of it is where it gets very interesting is that opening section where it says context of the organization. That part of the standard walks you through how to apply the standard to either a part of your organization or your whole organization, regardless of the industry. And then that Annex D gets into even more details about how this standard could work across different industries. So it is an attempt to be industry agnostic, but focused on AI. I know AI could be called an industry, but what I mean is, AI is also a cross-cutting technology, right? Does that help?
Then the next level of craziness is geography, governments, like pharma, international industry, right? How you deal with that?
So it is an international standard. What that means is that it was developed by almost all of the countries that participate in ISO and IEC, provided text and review and active input into the standard. That makes it an international standard. The extent to which it becomes adopted is yet to be seen, right? So two ways adoption happens. One is through industry practice, where a standard becomes a commonly used document and becomes de facto necessary or recommended through just business relationships. And then in other cases, regulators can come along and say, that fulfills my regulatory or policy objective, and they can reference it in regulation or industry guidance, and then it becomes, if it's referenced in regulation, it becomes part of the law. And many countries have a mechanism for doing that, including Canada, the US, the EU, many other countries have a mechanism for that. So we don't know yet how AIMS will exactly be picked up, but it is being looked at, and we'll talk a little bit more about what regulatory systems are looking at it. Yeah. Okay. I think was there any other opportunity that someone wanted to ask about?
More or less of a question, but I was wondering, how do you standardize proving biases? Because usually all training, if you're training a model, you're training on a lot of data sets, right? How do you prove the data that you have is biased in any ways? Like what's that standard like?
So there are, in JTC1, SC42, there are standards that are trying to get at those problems, to set criteria and assessment methodologies. I don't know the standards offhand, but there's a lot of standards under JTC1, SC42. You can look at them on the ISO website. AIMS doesn't specifically deal with data set bias, but it raises that as a risk that has to be somehow mitigated in your organizational processes. So it's not AIMS is not a perfect solution to that, but it ensures that if you're certified to AIMS, you've thought about it. And you've put in place a process to manage that risk. So, but the standards writing process is still going on for actually, further defining what it could mean to have unbiased AI. And maybe that'll go on for a long time. Another question.
Yeah, so does OpenAI should be compliant with the with the AIMS, or is the organizations which has to be compliant with the standards on their applications?
I'm going to answer, and if I missed your question, correct me. So the AIMS applies to the organization. It applies to the organization. Yes, in respect to its use of AI. It applies to the organization. So it's really only about the organization. AIMS is not a standard for AI as a product. That's coming. Okay. So we're gonna move on to the next section of the workshop. And Jacqueline's going to finish writing and then take the mic.
So what we were able to do is kind of test drive the AIMS standard as it was being developed. And what that meant was to hopefully answer some of those hurdles, see some of those opportunities, and see what we could learn and contribute back to the standard development to make this more meaningful to answer these questions. What that meant, and we've gone over this pyramid already, was that we needed someone in every tier. So at the top, we had Standards Council of Canada as that accreditation body, the checking of the checkers. At the middle level, that conformity assessment body role, the people that are allowed to give out the certificates, we had Ernst & Young, and I will talk about that Ray logo in a moment, and the certificate interested organization. That body at the bottom is a provincial bank out of Alberta called Alberta Treasury Branches, so financial sector. Something that's been brought up a couple of times with the AI bias question and AI product level specificity, there's no international standard for that right now. But as we all know, as a consumer, that is deeply unsettling. So what we did was partner with an organization called Responsible Artificial Intelligence Institute, or RAY Institute, who was on the panel earlier today, Alyssa. Their organization has developed what we call a conformity assessment scheme. What that means is a list of requirements. That list of requirements is specifically to test the reliability, the trustworthiness, maturity, and efficacy of an AI product. So although that's not coming from this ISO mothership, it's coming from a well-bred, amazingly tested conformity assessment scheme that's been tried and true on different use cases. So for this application, we tried doing it with the financial sector. So ATB, that bottom certificate interested organization, was getting tested against AIMS, what we've mentioned, organization level. How's your processes? How are your policies? How is your organization governing your AI tools? And then let's double click. Let's pick an AI tool and let's see how mature, reliable, trustworthy, and effective that is. This is basically what I just explained, but from the jargon specifically, if you're interested in conformity assessment and if you're aware of different buckets of accreditation, management systems are technically under what we call 17021-1. So an organization, if you're interested in giving out a certificate to AIMS in the future, right now, you have to be 17021-1 accredited. On the other hand, if you want to test AI products and you want to go in and see data bias, data drift, etc., you need to become accredited to 17065, ISO 17065. And those are both two very different pillars. And for those interested in medical devices, such as Justin's previous life, you know that there are some industries that require you to have both. Your product alone can't be certified. That's not sufficient trust. And you can't just say your organization is great. We don't know what your product's doing. So similarly, we mimicked that for our AI system. What did we want to find out? It's the best unknown question. What do we want to find out other than everything? But that's not good KPIs. So for KPIs and the measurements that we wanted to make, the regulators wanted to see, does this make sense? We're going to put this into regulation, or we may not. What's the difference? And luckily, the Treasury Board Secretariat of Canada has a tool that actually helps measure the risk associated with algorithmics, like algorithmic tools. It's called the Algorithmic Impact Assessment, and that fits perfectly with AI. And this tool is available online. You go through, you answer questions, and it basically gives you a risk score and a mitigation score, and then basically your residual risk score. So how ready are you to do this? That was our benchmark to say, before AIMS and before this pilot, where does ATB exist? After this pilot, they've gone, they've tested, they've updated, they've been compliant to some or all. How does their score change, if at all? Then, from the conformity assessment body role, Ernst & Young, they want to know, how much business can I get by giving out these certificates? Is this repeatable? Is this something I can do that is for any type of industry because it should? And that repeatability is really important. For the scheme owner, Ray, they want to know, this AI product level that we're going into, are these questions that we're asking use case specific enough? Or are they too pedantic? And do we need to make them a bit broader? And how flexibility weaves in to our questions? ATB, the guinea pig of this entire experience, wants to know, is this going to make me better for my clientele? Is this going to make me a competitor for bigger banks, or to build my trustworthiness and credibility in a different way? The answers we found out just a few months ago. From the regulator perspective, they got feedback on ATB's performance. Before they did this pilot, they had a certain score. After they did this pilot, their mitigation score went up. They're better equipped to handle their AI risks within the organization, which means that AIMS and potentially this Ray conformity assessment scheme is a really good tool to make their business more manageable and more effective at handling AI risk. From the conformity assessment body, they learned that yes, this is really repeatable. The requirements are really great organization-wide. At the same time, though, it's kind of hard to test completeness. With AI, that completeness factor is harder to actually judge. One example is the standard requires you to have an inventory of all of your AI tools. Where does Microsoft Suite fit into that? Technically, it's not an AI tool, but it has embedded features that are. So that completeness ends up being more of a discussion. Scheme owners, that Ray AI product conformity assessment scheme, how specific is the criteria? Is it great? Is it adaptable? And the answer was they actually did a phenomenal job, very minimal tweaking. So please talk to Alyssa after this. But, but also, if they can take this tool, this AI product assessment tool, and put it into healthcare, and put it into HR hiring policies, and put it into financial institutions, and the questions can pivot while remaining foundationally accurate, that is a phenomenal tool that can help bridge that gap where ISO has absolutely nothing right now. And then ATB, our guinea pig, how did they enjoy this process? From the AIMS experience, they were not able to achieve conformance with the draft version of the standard. They provided some feedback, terms and definitions came up. What does AI bias mean? Is that technical bias? Is that layman English bias? What does that mean? And for some of the requirements, such as you have a list of your inventory of AI tools, what does that need to look like? Now, understand, ATB is a financial institution. They know how to get audited. They really know how to provide evidence for certain controls. So if they were not able to achieve conformance with the standard, what can we as SCC do to help guide organizations that are more immature, new, fresh, a bit greener, or up to big banks that know the OSFI standards and really pedantic things of requirements? How do we help them achieve conformance if it's not accessible in this way? And the second component, what did they do responding to that AI product where they use this credit scoring model? How did they like that? They said that it was very good at identifying the problems within that one AI model. And it also forced them to find they may have policies in a different team that they already have and didn't know about until this moment. So in a very interesting way, this whole process identifies a company's silos and then helps you, forces you to talk to your colleagues and say, hey, procurement team, are you buying off-the-shelf AI? Hey, IT team, are you building AI? And who's doing the risk mapping? Who's doing the assessment of that? And it forces you to talk to your neighbors.
And we see that AI management systems standard is a key emerged normative document and is being observed and kind of monitored by a lot of different emerging regulations for AI. So a lot of jurisdictions are looking at ways of setting standards and regulation for AI. And those, standards and regulation do come together in the way I hinted at earlier, where a regulator can leverage the standardization system to create the actual technical requirements that fill in the objective of a particular regulation. So we know that in the European Union, AI management systems is being assessed for adoption by the European standards body, Sensenelec, and that if it is adopted, will become part of the compliance process for the EU AI Act. In Canada, regulators are looking not only to potentially use AIMS in regulation, but also to comply with AIMS themselves in their own regulatory and enforcement operations where they're leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning. So there's an interest across the board in Canada in the standard. And the US as well has launched a conformity assessment pathway for AIMS through accrediting certification bodies to then go out and offer certification to AIMS. So just a snapshot of where the standard is going, and to leave you with the impression that it is being carefully looked at across multiple jurisdictions, not only these three. So we'll finish with this. We'll have a quick chance to chat, and then we're going to wrap it up very shortly. So quickly with your teams, with your groups, knowing what you know now about AIMS, how might it impact your organization? Just a couple minutes for this one, and then we'll wrap it up because we're almost there, right?
Questions will probably take 10 minutes. Want to give this like 2? We'll probably feel it. This has been fun. Minimal people.
Just one more minute for this conversation, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, we're gonna wrap it up, and then we have a little bit extra time, so we'll take more questions. Just throw them at us here in a minute. But we'll close with just a recap of the key takeaways. So which one am I doing?
Whichever one you want. You were doing the second one.
Yeah, you go ahead.
So, doing a review of standards and conformity assessment, where this impacts us as consumers, as individuals, and knowing about the process. Know that it is very open, it's very consensus driven, and the idea is to bring in as many smart minds as possible. And you'll hear in other talks, smart minds don't necessarily mean technical in the way of AI. It's ethicists, it's psychologists, it's open-ended philosophers, and they're actually helping bridge the gap. It's very interdisciplinary. From the second point, make sure that you align to the compliance, because that's where we actually build the trust, which brings us to that third point. The reason why accreditation is important and working with an accredited body is important is it does show that they have been checked. There is some level of third-party assurance saying that they are doing it correctly. It's an ongoing assessment every year. ASB, like SCC, will go in and make sure they're still doing it the right way. And in a pace like AI, making sure that you can align with those organizations built with trust can help you mitigate future costs, reputational risks, etc.
Yes, and to on the side of Ames, as we've tried to communicate and hope we've shared some of the vocabulary necessary for watching Ames in the marketplace and how it emerges. Hopefully you see how that standardization system works and can think about it effectively in your organization, because Ames really is slated to be a kind of key international consensus document, and it's the world's first international standard for AI management systems. So it can be a great first standard for your organization to figure out what's this all about and where are all those linking to other standards that might matter. And it's influencing discussions on AI governance globally. So it's our goal here today was to bring it to your attention, to give you the vocabulary and the overview of the standardization system so that you can think about it effectively in your organizations. And if you want to go on a deeper dive into how it might impact the EU AI Act in compliance with the EU AI Act, our colleagues from BSI are doing a workshop here tomorrow at 11:40, so they're going to be going into more about the EU AI Act, so that'll be of interest to many of you. And do we have time? So are there any other questions that people would like to ask? I'll run around with the mic and we can chat.
Second table, blue dress.
Oh, I'm seeing here. Okay, coming.
Well, thanks for that great presentation. So I'm also with BSI. So one of the things that kind of perked up my ears is that when you did your pilot program with Ernst & Young, so you're the accreditation body, Ernst & Young is a conformity assessment body, and then they have their client. Now, Ernst & Young, I believe, also has a performs consulting capacity. How do you, as the accreditation body, separate those two roles, and how do you check that? And one other comment is, it was a little disappointing to hear that you had the conversations about monetization of the service, because that should be out of the question for whether you accredit someone or not. But otherwise, if you can answer the first question.
I'm not sure I follow your second comment, but you can.
I agree completely with you, Justin. Yes.
Yeah.
So to answer the first part, and just to reiterate at high level, the question is around consulting firms. They have a consulting and they have an audit and advisory. And I'm waving my hands like a dance, but they are supposed to be firewalled, and technically they're not supposed to interface at all. The beauty of the pilot was that hand-holding exercise, which was, here is the compliance you need to meet, and we can hold your hand and tell you how. The standard will not do that. The standard says, this is the requirement you need to meet, choose your own adventure, and we're gonna assess if you're at the end point. So for the pilot specifically, they were allowed to advise and audit. In real life, firewall. So that means that there need to be support mechanisms to help organizations looking to achieve compliance that cannot consult with their conformity assessment body on that how. So again, from the pilot, hence such great learnings, we were blurring that line to say, hey, can you actually hold their hand? The team at Ernst & Young, one individual was from audit, the other one was from advisory. So the team itself helped with that. The second question, the monetizing, I didn't, yeah. We will compete with the neighboring booth.
Hi, my name is Jessica Rowland, and I was well, first, thank you. I got to understand a bit more what standards are. But now I'd like to, if possible, if you could explain the difference and the interrelations between policies, principles, standards, rules, directive, guidelines, and all that ecosystem. That would help.
Yeah, so in the way I think about it is there is a arena of rules, and those rules can come from government, they can come from the standardization system, from standards development organizations, and they can come from sort of a private rules development process. And in each case, those rules have different relationship to your business. Sometimes private standards will be the norm in a given industry, and they are de facto mandatory. Standards from the consensus standards system are, upon publication, they're voluntary until a regulatory agency makes them mandatory. So typically standards developed by consensus standards that we're talking about are voluntary until made mandatory. Sorry to state the obvious. So, and then in regulatory, government uses a whole bunch of different instruments for articulating rules, directives, regulations. There's a whole number of them. But I think that's probably the best way I would sort of start answering that question. Okay.
We have time for one more question. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm not sure if you can answer. What does ATB, was that the name of the bank, thought about the process? I want to know if they thought the process was cumbersome, because every time we bring new regulation and new changes, the business is a bit, I don't know, preoccupied about how it's going to affect them.
So the question was, how did ATB respond to the process, and what were their thoughts and opinions on the process? Initially, it is the sell of why are we doing this? Because almost always people are working at maximum capacity, if not above. So why would I do something that's voluntary that I may not comply with? So there's high risk, low reward potentially. For this specifically, it was you get insight into a standard that's not publicly available, and it sets you up for success when it does become available, because you will literally know and have had a hand in shaping what those requirements are. What was interesting as a hurdle, the sort of threat of interdisciplinary within the organization and the concern of having to talk to your neighbor did actually lead to significant delays. The opportunity being that other teams did have solutions that actually aligned with our project team that they would not have known about otherwise. So as awkward as it is, breaking down those silos that are high functioning, they're busy, they're revenue generating, they're brilliant, breaking that down, or at least creating some neural networks in between, optimize their organization completely to the point where even without receiving the conformance check mark with this exercise, their performance and their confidence with their clients have improved significantly. They're not seeing this as a loss, which is quite frankly incredible. They're just excited because now they have integrated pathways within their organization that make them better suited for this standard and others in the future if they want. Yeah. Yeah? Yeah. Justin, you want one more? What are we? For those interested in one more question is happening.
Thank you. OSFI E23 is an upcoming regulation that's going to go into effect July 2025, I believe, and it's it's not voluntary. Like banks will have to be compliant to it.
Yeah.
In the Venn diagram between AIMS and E23, E23 is model risk management, so there are a lot of crossovers.
Yeah.
How do you communicate the priorities for banks, and how do you tell them that maybe if you do AIMS, you're better prepared for E23? Is that a thing?
Yeah, so the question was basically a mapping exercise against other compliance activities. For this one specifically, it's for the financial sector. And the mapping exercise is being done, and it's to help. The easy win is against other ISO standards because there's a lot of overlap. And then for the financial sector, what was elevated through this pilot was, oh, we're already having to do this. The most basic answer is communication amongst teams, which is, oh, we already have that. That's like communication integration happened. And that also helps with the value proposition of a voluntary standard. If you win that, you can also win AIMS with only 3 extra steps, is the value proposition that actually sold this pilot very easily to financial institutions. If there are any other questions, please feel free to reach out to Justin or myself, or we have a booth a couple cubicles away. But thank you very much for attending, Justin.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.